Today I want to talk about the tools and workflows that exist in the Linux terminal that users of intermediate and advanced skill levels may encounter. This is actually the second video in a series of videos about using the Linux terminal, where the first video covered the basic workflows. In other words, if you're interested in learning the basics, then I would strongly encourage you to check out that video. But if you're an intermediate or advanced user, then I would personally not bother. Anyway, with this preamble out of the way, let's begin with the intermediate workflows in the Linux terminal. Let's talk about what I would consider to be an intermediate user. If you already have an understanding of the basic file structure in the Linux terminal and how to see information about the file system in basic ways, and you want to learn about more advanced ways to get the information that you want, then you're an intermediate user. An intermediate user would know that most commands can take a whole bunch of flags to present data in different ways, or to do different things. Even commands as simple as ls have a lot of flags. As an example, I often want to see the size of all the files in a given directory, sorted by when they were last modified. The way to do that is to type in ls-ltha, which is just a single command. Now, the most common way to find out about what a command can do is by either looking at the manual page on the command, or if one does not exist, then you can try running the command with the -h flag and hope for the best. To look at the manual page, you type the word man followed by a space and then the command you want to see the manual page for. I know that many people prefer not to sit in the terminal for too long, so here is some good news for people that do not like it. There are a ton of online resources, both YouTube videos and text tutorials, that can teach you the intricacies of different commands and how to use them. Therefore, I will go a bit more high level for the rest of this video, especially when compared to the previous video. Let me introduce you to another useful tool, grep. This is the most common tool to search for specific patterns in a file or set of files. As an example, with a specific incantation on the command line, you can find all occurrences of a word in all files in a given directory, along with the line numbers where that word appeared. I guess that now is as good of a time as any to introduce I/O redirection and pipes. For I/O redirection, you can make the output of a command go to a specific file, even a new one. Another use is providing input to a program from a file instead of having to type things out by hand. This is super useful, and to get more details, look up I/O redirection in Linux in Google. As for pipes, well, you can separate two commands with a vertical line, and that will cause the output of the first command to be provided as input to the second command. This is incredibly useful. Let me show you why. Let's say you want to filter the output of the ls-ltha command to only show you files that were modified in May. In this case, you can type ls-ltha followed by a vertical bar and then followed by grep May, and this will drop all lines of output that do not have the word May in them. There are many other ways to use pipes, but this should be a nice and simple example that shows its power. Okay, let's wrap up this section by talking about two more things: text editors and terminal multiplexers. When it comes to text editors, I simply have to bring up two options: Vim and Emacs. Now, as you can see by my t-shirt, I love Vim, so I will ignore Emacs, as I also know next to nothing about it, even though I do know that it's a very powerful text editor. When it comes to Vim, it's super versatile, powerful, and lightweight. It doesn't need to look boring as hell either, as you can customize it to look however you want. And with a couple plugins, you can add functionalities such as file explorers, autocomplete, linters, and so on. In other words, Vim can be a full-on IDE if you want it to be. As for terminal multiplexers, there are also two that are very famous: tmux and screen. I personally prefer tmux because of the slight visual cue that makes it easier to tell what is going on the screen. But the general idea of a terminal multiplexer is the same across all of them. A terminal multiplexer is basically a program that allows you to have multiple terminals inside of one. This is useful as you can tile a single terminal window into whatever configuration you need, with windows that can be split per project or task. It's especially neat when you're moding into a server, as commands and output persist in the tmux or screen session even if you disconnect. As you can tell, the more advanced the topics get, the more high level the discussion. Speaking of which, let's go for even more advanced workflows now. When talking about advanced workflows, I need to actually split them into three types. where each subsequent type is the superset of the preceding ones. The 3 types of advanced workflows I will talk about are consumer enthusiast workflows, professional developer workflows, and system administrator workflows. Let's begin with the consumer enthusiast workflows. Here's what I mean by this type. It's typically someone that uses Linux as the main OS on their computer and is enthusiastic about using the terminal. However, they mostly use it to manage their computer and that's it. Many enthusiasts love to customize their systems to their exact preference and specification, which is also called ricing. After all, Linux is unbelievably customizable, so why shouldn't you? Therefore, the first thing that many enthusiasts do is learn how to use their package manager. A package manager is software that manages other software and its dependencies on the system. Effectively, if you want to install some software, you can do so by running a simple command in the terminal and get it installed in no time flat, along with all of its dependencies. Now, in the previous section of this video, I introduced a lot of commands that run in the terminal, and the software that runs these commands is called the shell. This shell can actually be swapped out for a different one. I showed you most of the examples in the bash shell, but I personally use ZSH on my own computer, and I know many people that like to use fish instead. This ability to swap components of the operating system actually goes pretty far, with some people going as far as changing the system-level software such as systemd. I don't know if it's even possible to change the desktop manager and system software like systemd outside of the terminal, so it's no surprise that most people do it through the terminal. Lastly, a lot of end software configuration can be done through the terminal. Personally, if I had to change the audio levels for my computer, I would use whatever software KDE provides in the taskbar, assuming I don't change my audio through the headphone amp directly. But some people like to use terminal utilities like ALSA Mixer to do it through the terminal instead. Having talked about consumer enthusiasts, I think it's time to talk about professional developers and how they might use the terminal. Now, I need to preface this part with the following statement. Not all software devs like to use the terminal. Actually, most don't. But those that work with servers, distributed systems, and do other similar types of backend development typically use the terminal a lot. As an example, I write OS level software and I typically work out of a remote server, so I use Vim and a lot of other terminal utilities every day in my job. Most of the time, professional developers that work out of the terminal will have the knowledge of most of the consumer enthusiast workflows by necessity, along with a lot of the extra knowledge that many consumer enthusiasts will not really care about. I already brought up the fact that Vim and Emacs can be tricked out to be fully fledged IDEs, and while that's cool, most consumer enthusiasts probably don't care. Along with text editors, there is all the software to compile and run programs, such as GCC, Clang, Python, Java-C, and so on. In addition to typical package managers that manage regular software, there are specialized package managers for software development, such as pip for Python and npm for Node.js. These package managers allow you to install specific libraries that enable your software to do more than you could do on your own, such as checking if a number is even. Anyway, along with editors and package managers, there exist version control systems such as Git, Perforce, Mercurial, SVN, and more. Most of these version control systems have programs to interface through the terminal. Matter of fact, the GUI components are an added bonus in most cases and not the other way around. Lastly, I just have to bring up shell scripting. Many developers over time learn how to write scripts that work in the terminal either in Python, Perl, or Bash that automate some tasks. Maybe it's running tests, checking in on the status of a pull request, updating binaries across multiple packages, or automating the release process for software. All of this can be done with scripts. This means there are many tools and utilities that literally nobody else but the developer that made them knows about, and an enormous number of other tools that only exist in the terminal. Hell, a coworker of mine wrote a script that would pull Google Maps and tell you in the terminal when the next bus is coming just so he didn't have to leave the terminal to check. I actually used that script a lot back in the day myself. Now that we have talked about professional developers, I have to talk about the people that know even more, the system administrators. While consumer enthusiasts know how to manage their own systems and professional developers might know how to automate some workflows further on their own systems, system administrators typically know how to set up entire systems across an entire office or even data centers. Hell, those guys have to connect Linux systems to printers to make them work. They don't just use Linux terminal tools, they install, configure, and provision them across entire organizations. They need to know how to connect many devices together to make them usable for everyone. In other words, their entire job is to tinker with the Linux terminal. Now, it's quite obvious that my knowledge of what they do is super limited. After all, I myself am just a professional developer. I don't have to do system administration. However, there is a YouTube channel that talks about Linux system administration that I would like to recommend. The channel name is Sean Powers, and I would like to recommend his video on Linux certifications to get a brief idea of how deep the system administration rabbit hole goes. Yes, there is enough stuff to learn in system administration on Linux that there are many different certifications that you could take. Anyway, I don't have anything else to say for this section, so let's just wrap up this video. Alright, in this video I showed you the basics of using the Linux terminal, and followed that up by introducing you to some more tools that you might find useful as you progress in your knowledge of how to use a Linux terminal. After that, I talked about some of the more advanced workflows that some people have for the terminal. I really hope that you learned something new for yourself in this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Also, if you want me to make a video on something specific, then ask away as well. I have made a few videos from people's suggestions already. Either way, thank you for your time. Bye.